Welcome to the Scaling Japan podcast. I'm your host, Tyson Batino. On today's episode, we have Shay Khosrowshahi. He is the co-founder of NXL and was previously managing director of Ulife APAC. I've known him from when they first entered the Japanese market, and now they have more than 50 customers. And so it's really good to have you on the podcast today to talk about partnerships in Japan. And I thought you are the perfect person for it because you've effectively utilized it in your experience scaling Ulife in Japan. So please introduce yourself, Shay.
Thank you for having me, Tyson. It's a pleasure to finally do this. I know we've gone back and forth a few times, so it's thank you for the patience. Um, so for everyone listening, my name is Shay Khosrowshahi, and I have been working across the kind of go-to-market space for over a decade now. Most recently, over the last 5 or 6 years, I've been building a company called Ulife across the UK, and I moved to Japan about a year and a half ago, where we had an investor, Daiichi Life, invest 100 million into the Ulife business, and I was sent there to help launch Ulife in a very exciting but rather challenging market. Um, so yeah, here I am, and I'm also now venturing into the world of AI through a company called NXL. So I'm currently based between uh, Dubai, London, and Japan. So I travel across all three.
Awesome. So yeah, I think you had a really intense experience for the last 18 months and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on partnerships in Japan and especially utilizing partnerships as a growth mechanism for the Japan.
Excited, excited to get into it.
So I guess my first question is, what is your definition of a partnership, at least from a Japan context?
Yeah, so from my perspective, the definition of a partnership is any individual or organization that is actively contributing to mutual growth, whether that be through complementary strengths or skill sets, resources, and credibility. I think as we've already kind of mentioned briefly, Japan is a very nuanced market, and credibility is everything, right? There's literally people and businesses who will not do business with you if you do not have credibility. And so what a partnership can do is it can accelerate that credibility, which can open up many, many doors across the board.
Awesome. And could you maybe describe maybe like the different types of partnership relationships or partners you've had?
Yeah, so we've predominantly worked with two different kind of types of partnerships. So the first one would be kind of distribution partners, where you're effectively leveraging the sales force or the distribution capability of a partner. So in our case, when we landed, we were partnered up with Daiichi Life. In that context, they were a distribution partner because we were effectively leveraging their sales force, their credibility to distribute our product. But then you also have the idea of kind of strategic alliances. And strategic alliances for us, well, for Ulife at the time and even now, is working with insurers in more of a kind of embedded way, where you're doing kind of co-marketing. You're actually creating a product that's a win-win with sort of customization included as well. So those are the main types of partnerships that we would actively be searching when we were in Japan.
Awesome. And so I guess in terms of maybe like the distribution partner, maybe what are some tips on how to identify and maybe vet potential sales partners? Because there's a lot of people who offer those services, but
Yeah,
I think for a person coming for the first time, choosing the right person can make all the difference.
absolutely. So when I landed in Japan, so I knew kind of the types of partners we were going to go after. So in our case, it was insurance carriers. We would typically go after them across the world, but in Japan, we obviously had Daiichi were an investor, so we almost had the soft landing with them. So we kind of kept Daiichi as our main insurance partner. But then we also around the world worked with brokers as well. So these are kind of employee benefits brokers. They distribute for insurance carriers. They
Uh,
distribute employee benefits across the board. So those are the ones that we were searching for. And then when it came to kind of influential individuals, for us, we actually did an exercise just before we came to Japan where we leveraged AI, ChatGPT, LinkedIn, etc., and we essentially scraped all of the kind of HR influencers.
yeah,
So it's a kind of different type of model where HR influencers who had credibility in the Japanese market because our product was being sold to HR, right? So anyone who could give us credibility among that audience was going to be beneficial for us. So we also looked at kind of vetting them, whether that would be through kind of research, word of mouth. We kind of identified a list.
gotcha. And I guess yeah, so I guess what my next question would be is like, how do you determine if they're capable or they could actually be of assistance to you?
Yeah, so there's a few different things here. So the first thing is around certainly when it came to kind of the larger organizations we were partnering with, it was like, okay, what are their book of customers? How much revenue are they doing? But I think the more important thing for me was how ambitious they were, or in other words, how hungry they were. And when we ended up working with one partner, and throughout the kind of conversation and the process, they were constantly demonstrating to me that they were hungry to, work with us, to sell our product, to get above their competitors. They were making acquisitions in the market. So they were hungry for that growth. And I think, Tyson, you and I both know when it comes to selling a value-based product, you need to be hungry, right? Because it's not a commodity sale. It's not an easy sell. So you have to be, able to pick up the phone. You have to be hungry for that growth. And that is ultimately what I look out for when I'm trying to qualify a partner, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's from my personal experience with Smart Start Japan, which does incorporation and setup, I don't really have to
Yeah.
explain the value too much. It's in our case, we have native English speakers, we understand the system, and people need to
Mhm.
incorporate, so it's pretty much a done deal. But when it comes to value-based, yeah, you have to follow up, you have to show them that you believe in the product, show the product, and it's kind of like
Absolutely.
let's say, at least in Smart Start Japan case, it's we're selling something that's a must. Like
Yeah.
it's not yes or no. They're gonna get it. It's just who are they
Yeah.
gonna buy it from
Yeah,
versus
absolutely.
value
And
based. It's
absolutely. Absolutely.
dealing with.
And from our perspective, we were, you know, um, everyone thinks they're selling a product that everyone needs, but that's not always the case, right? When it comes to selling a value-based product, you have to look at, is this, how are you impacting either, revenue, cost, or risk? And I think that's kind of key to all of your discussions to kind of communicate to people that you can actually make a difference to the bottom line with whatever it is that you're actually bringing to the market.
Yeah, because your biggest competitor for value-based products is inaction.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In action is how we drive the urgency. So
So yeah, so I think you mentioned that so you had one partner who was very, they had the connections to the corporates and let's say, and also, for them it makes perfect sense because they wanted to show that they have more value than their competitors,
yeah.
leveraging your product. But how did you kind of align incentives with them to keep them motivated and I guess long term?
Yeah. So the first step is for me is really deeply understanding their business, their commercial targets, their commercial model. So the process that I went through across the board was, I follow a very kind of strict process to partnerships. So as I was entering the Japanese market, I was like, okay, firstly, these are the guys I want to talk to. So, it's the partner and all the competitors around the partner. And I usually kind of tie it into like a 2 to 3 week window to have that first meeting. Because I think that's important for almost mentality, right? You want to really double down and focus your efforts on trying to have the right conversations. Every time you learn something, you can apply it to the next conversation you're having with another partner. So that 2 to 3 window is always really quite important for me. But then that first meeting is key, right? It's almost what I call it's a discovery process. You're working out if this is a right fit. It's the first date, so to speak, right? So it's about understanding, their revenue goals, their sales targets, their growth priorities, and then assessing whether you can actually make an impact on their business, right? So,
Yeah, could
so
you
I would say
double
the
down on that? Because I realized
sure.
one question probably the listeners are asking is how to actually convince them to work with me in the first place.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
yeah, I
absolutely.
love
So I would say that first meeting, discovery process, I would say, I'm speaking 30% of the time and the partner is speaking 70% of the time. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to ask the right questions to unlock the almost the pain, or where I can have that impact. So if they're telling me, for example, that they've got they need to accelerate their revenue, they need to grow by 15 to 20% this year, that's almost like a bingo moment for me, because I'm like, okay, cool, so you need to grow by 15 to 20%, where is that growth coming from? Okay, and a lot of the time it's like, okay, they may not know, they're looking for different avenues. So at that point it's like, okay, I can have an impact. So then towards the end of the call, you have almost like 10 to 15 minutes to kind of pitch where you think you could have that impact. And then you move on to the next conversations, right? And the next conversations is about, I like to take a very numbers driven approach to things. So, if they agree that they think that, it's worth having the second conversation, I start to request more information. So performance data. What are their revenue targets for next year? How much of that should come from new business versus existing revenue? And then I can start to forecast how I can have an impact on their business. Because if I know they need to do 2 million of revenue next year, and I have experience unlocking more, that revenue with other partners or whatever it might be, I can actually forecast and demonstrate to them that I can have that impact. And I think the key to all of this is they need to see you, they need to be a champion of you, um, and they need to see you as someone that can help them get to their revenue targets. And I think that's absolutely critical to all of this. And then the other thing I would say is throughout all of this, executive alignment is key, because you're going to be speaking to a work, you're potentially speaking to like a working team. In Japan, it's all consensus driven. But having that regular executive to executive alignment is really important. So every time, our CEO was in town in Japan, I would make sure that they were meeting the CEO of the partner.
Mm.
Um, so that's key, because they need to also build that trust and they need to be aligned on the priorities.
And one thing, like early in the journey that impressed me with you guys is when we had our chats, you guys would come to me and say like, Can you introduce me to this?" Like you would bring a list of people. Can you
Yeah,
introduce me to
yeah,
like these five people? And so that was one thing that really impressed me when we were working together. And do you have maybe any other tips for how you actually got a meeting with these, let's say, people who could really
yeah.
push you guys forward?
Yes. So lots of tips. um, as you said, the first thing I would always look at is warm introductions. I know that I know Tyson, and Tyson and I trust each other. Hopefully, I've added value to Tyson once upon a time. So, I would look at, for example, LinkedIn, or I would have a conversation with you and I would ask you if you would know specific people or specific companies. That was always a key way for me to kind of get those initial intros. Um, and then, I would also leverage uh, partnerships outside of Japan as well. So, for example, some of the brokers we actually worked with, we knew that, we were working with them in the UK. So we'd ask someone
Mm.
senior to introduce us to someone senior in the Japanese market. That was always very, very important. The other thing is something that I do quite regularly as a tip is I actually find out what events people are going to. If I can't get in touch with them in whatever way, whether that be through dropping them an email or going through Tyson or whatever it might be, I would find out where they could be attending an event, or they could be speaking at an event, and I would essentially go and visit them in person. There's nothing like a face-to-face connection. Um, and ultimately, if you have something that can genuinely solve someone's problem, um, there's no reason why that person shouldn't speak to you.
Mm.
It's just about getting that initial meeting, and you have to be creative in how you do it.
Yeah, and for you and Lewis, the team, I mean, you guys came here with no Japanese skills, and
Yeah,
you built it up to 50 customers. And
yeah,
so one thing that has impressed me with you guys is you guys have done, boots on the ground, getting the sales done, and and you guys are like, yep, we're gonna do this. Like it was kind of like, let's say, no hesitation, really focused. But so you guys, perform at a very high level. How did you guys maybe kind of get maybe your partners, maybe sales teams, or some of the sales distributors that you work with? How do you get them to maybe effectively represent your brand, Ulife, when you're managing director?
yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. It's a great question. I do think it comes down to just making sure the initial alignment is set up. The partnership is set up for success right from the beginning. People are bought in throughout the journey. We went through a training program with the partners. So we would do 6 to 8 sessions. Try to get them to understand again what are the problems that our product is solving, and what does that mean for the customer, and why it's important for them. So we do kind of 6 to 8 sessions around that, really going through the details of the product. And then one thing I would always say when you're working with a partner, um, and especially if it's a distribution type partnership where you have a sales force, let's say it's like 50, I think people need to kind of build that trust, and they need to get excited. And one way to get excited is showing sales. So what we would always try and look out for is one or two, really hungry people who, almost we would call the champions within that
Mm.
partner.
Gotcha.
Help give them some early wins, and then what you'll find is that people start to pay attention. All the other sales teams start to pay attention, and they think, okay, wow, this thing is actually quite cool. And then they start to build momentum.
Awesome. Yes. I think one of the early times, like you guys just came to, oh yeah, we closed 5 deals. It's like, oh wow. That's very cool.
Yeah, yeah. It
Like,
wasn't just us, of course. We were targeting the mainly the international speaking,
mm,
either international speaking Japanese people or foreigners in Japan, a combination of the two. Because we couldn't speak Japanese. We did try initially to do some sales calls through interpreters, but that was a complete it just didn't work. And then obviously we then built a team to kind of do the Japanese speaking sales, which worked pretty well.
So yeah, so you mentioned earlier that you did connect with some people who are very influential in the HR space and also the insurance space. But
Yeah.
and also how did you kind of sustain these relationships and I guess even with the sales distributors as well so that they would continue delivering? So one of the people that was on your list, her name is Rina Sakuraba. who is also a
Yeah.
former guest for the listeners. She did one on Nemoashi and I think Tatemae and Hone. So I would highly recommend listening to both episodes. But I know that she was really influential in your beginning too. And maybe tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah. So Rena is an incredible lady. She's been on here on your podcast multiple times, I know. So runs her own kind of coaching HR business. And I think that, I mentioned it earlier, but the first thing in any partnership is to really understand how you can help the other person or the other business. In Rena's case, I understood that, she had a great service and a really strong business, and she was the business in many ways. But it's not the easiest business to scale, right? So service businesses are harder to scale than kind of SaaS or product led businesses. And she was wearing a lot of hats herself. So I offered her to kind of support her through like a couple of ways, right? One, we had a marketing budget coming into Japan, and we were targeting the same audience. So I knew that if I could support her with marketing and events, that could be really valuable to her. And then the other thing was because I had a product that was aligned with some of the things that she was, some of her services, I could offer her, an opportunity to create a recurring revenue system, right? Which can help, make her business more scalable. So again, just going back to it is like, okay, how can I help that person's business grow and support her? And that's the lens I went into that conversation with, which helped. And she was incredible in terms. She actually referred us to a bunch of people. One of the amazing gentlemen she referred us to was a guy called Daisuke Sugita-san. And he, at the time, and still is actually the manager of HR manager of Havas in Japan. And Havas were actually a client of ours in the UK and were
Mm,
on my radar to speak to them um, in Japan. And she actually made that intro for us. And I can't tell you how influential that introduction was, especially when you're starting up as a business. I pitched to Sagita-san, I pitched to his whole kind of CEO, two CEOs, two CFOs, and within 2 weeks we got that contract signed.
oh, gotcha.
And Sugita-san has been a champion ever since, and he's someone who has helped us so much throughout the kind of our journey in Japan, whether that be speaking at our events, whether that be when we're doing a partnership, actually being the person that the partners go to be the stamp of approval. So he actually spoke to some of the partners about the impact that our product has,
Mhm.
um, and that gave us so much momentum in the market. And as a company who is entering Japan, one thing to think about, and I always talk about it, is momentum is everything. You know, do the volume, get those small wins, and those small wins will lead to bigger wins. And it's a kind of a it just goes. It's like a spiral. So yeah, that was key, and that wouldn't have happened without Rena.
Awesome. And Rena is she was the CHRO of One Coin English, my first company. And also when I started AI Market, which I'm going to change the background to, I asked a bunch of friends if they could, support us with, purchasing a gift coupon to send to your friends in the future. No questions. She bought it. And what's it? What I really like about her is that she's a very long-term thinker. Because I had a lot
Yeah.
of I didn't ask you guys, but I asked a lot of other friends, and they're like, let me think about it. And I still remember like who supported me and who didn't support me for that. And it's
Yeah,
so if they're listening, I remember. But people
absolutely.
remember, who supports you in the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. You never forget, and I think that's also the key to sustaining some of these relationships ongoing, right?
Great point.
I think it's really about like genuinely adding value and showing up with the intent to help people and not just gain. Um, and this is why, just going on a bit of a segue here. I don't think beings will be completely replaced by AI, even though there's so much hype around it, because AI will be able to make people more efficient, and it will be able to do 80% of the repetitive tasks that the human being is doing now or was doing. But ultimately, it's the human beings that can, connect people and create the value and really drive things forward. Um, so yeah, so a friend of mine, a great example of this, a friend of mine in Japan, a guy called Aki Narita, he's also in the kind of HR space. He shared a phrase that really stuck with me, and it's basically karma as a strategy, and it kind of perfectly summed up my approach in Japan, which is do good things for people and people you believe in without expecting anything in return, right? And over time, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not even be in 6 months' time or a year's time, but eventually, good things will come back to you. And I genuinely believe that. And that's a key principle of mine in any partnership.
Oh, I love that. And it's actually really, really relevant for me right now because probably listen, you've heard of Business in Japan, Jason Ball. That guy's just
Yeah,
networking all the time. And we're just in talks of me becoming like kind of like a member of his, club. And we just
yeah,
talked yesterday. I had some questions. He answered my questions. I trust him over long periods of time. I hope this will bring me value down the road, but I just took out my credit card and paid for the membership. And
absolutely. Yeah.
over time, something will come back.
100%, 100%. And I think it comes back to that point of like if you genuinely connect with someone and you genuinely believe in that person as well, I think why wouldn't you do that?
And
You
I
know?
love that point you
Um,
mentioned, like, you believe in that person. Because that was
100%.
exactly the point in my case. I believe in him.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you're someone who, genuinely wants to make a difference in the world, right? So when you can spot someone else who's doing that, it might not be in the same area as you, but like doubling down on that person, I think it comes back to reward you long term. So um yeah, help people is the summary.
So, and I'll follow up with on partnerships. It's so there's a lot of people who are well connected, but I guess how do you decide whether someone is really influential or just maybe they might be well connected but might not be able to get an impact?
Yeah, so I would say I would always look at, are they a subject matter expert? And what have they done in the past to make them a subject matter expert? Because ultimately, in a specific field, people can cut through the BS. So excuse my French. Because once you get past that surface level and you go deeper, you can start to work out the people who, have been there and done it and really know what they're talking about and who maybe, haven't done it, right? And I think a good example of this is you see all these kind of business influencers online, and I can usually tell because I've been in GTM, I've done all sort of functions within a go-to-market within the go-to-market area. I can tell when whether it's BS or not. A guy who I follow quite a lot, I read all his books, is a guy called Alex Hormozy,
Same
which you may
here.
or may not have heard of. He's someone you can tell that he's been there and done it, and he's got the subject matter expertise. And I think that's really important. In Japan, we had a few of these kind of influencers. Obviously, Rena's one of them. You look at what she's done in her career, CHRO, moved forward initiatives related to culture. We had a guy who was also a key partner of us, a guy called Piotr Felix, who he'd written 10 books on the subject of culture and transforming culture. He did it at Morgan Stanley, he did it at Google. So you can quite quickly cut through the noise.
Actually, it's two people who I think you got connected through me, so
Yeah, man. And a guy called Tyson Martino. He makes all the introductions.
So I guess yeah, so I'll say I'm pretty sure, with these partner relationships in one, and plus you guys are going hardcore. So was there any unexpected hurdles in managing these partnerships, relationships? especially, coming from, you came from the UK and basically
Yeah.
from day one, you're just hit the ground running.
Yeah, I would be lying to you if I told you there were no challenges. I think, a lot of them came down to cultural differences and language barriers, for sure. And I think the cultural differences in particular, they can make it hard to identify, misalignment and more importantly, actually, to correct course once things are drifting. But more particularly, just to make it really relevant for Japan, in Japan, there's often a very strong commitment to the preserving the harmony, which means people may avoid confrontation even when something isn't working, or maybe fearing disappointment of someone higher above, and that can make it really, really challenging. I've experienced cases where everyone kind of knew this particular project just wasn't working, right? But people didn't want to rock the boat and have the very honest conversations, to correct course or disappoint someone, or whatever it might be. So that is definitely, just going back to it, some of the hurdles I've experienced in Japan.
Awesome. And yeah, I think some of the things that have really impressed me about you is that I think even though let's say your goals were very, very ambitious, extremely
Yeah.
ambitious, it's what really impressed me was that you were grounded, humble, always very kind, and also like always gave the impression that you cared. And so for me, like
Thank
that
you.
was,
Appreciate that.
it's they're short letter words, but to do all of them simultaneously, it is a monumental
Yeah.
task. And so usually I meet
Yeah.
people who are good at one but not the other. But to have someone who can like embody all of that. So I just want to share 'cause I think it is a good example for the listeners of I think
Yeah.
like let's say a personality type that can work in Japan.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think being humble in Japan is so key. Very, very important.
But also at the same time, you're very driven, let's say ambitious, and like let's say managing that kind of delicate balance because it actually is like a juggling act, I think. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
yeah,
I do think part of it, and this goes back to, like, in terms of partnerships, just making that effort to understand the culture in Japan, it goes a really, really long way. Um, I'd heard it, and actually listening to some of your podcasts, I heard some of your guests talk about it before I entered Japan, around the small things you can do that make a big difference. But genuinely, I've seen it firsthand. So one of the things I was always, for just like, um, learning how to say some words, learning some of the language, learning how to properly exchange and receive business cards, learning the etiquette. I think that's important. Ultimately, the reality is it's going to be very hard to trust someone who is so far away from you. Um, but there's things you can do to make that process easier. So why not do them?
and so I think you in particular did a really good job of investing in Japan, but not overly investing, like spending too much time learning the culture.
Yeah, I think you have to have a balance, right? That's really important, because if you overinvest, then you could lose some of the attributes that help you move stuff forward. I think that in partnerships, that was really key, right? While I was really investing in the culture and the respect, and these kind of small gestures, I was also very clear that I didn't want to waste my time. And sometimes being really direct and to the point, is key in all of this, right? As part of the communication, because these partnership deals can take long enough. Um, Overanalyzing can double the amount of time it takes. So, being very direct in those attributes actually served me quite well in Japan. There were many instances where I was maybe the bad cop in the room, where my Japanese counterpart or my Japanese sales director was, very respectful, and I just had to say, guys, we need to move forward on this, and we've analyzed enough, we've proved it. Now it's about let's hit those revenue targets, and I think that balance really helped. Good cop, bad cop, I call it.
Because and because I think, and I mean, I am kind of like praising you, but one reason for that is, I mean, you guys got 50 clients, I think over 18 months, and
Yeah.
most people, most go-to-market people that I speak to who work for, foreign SaaS companies, they might get, and these are people that I don't work with, but
Right.
they get like maybe they'll get one client, they'll get two clients over a 1 year span, but you're able to get 50.
Yeah.
And so
It's because it was because of you, man. The others weren't working with you. That's the problem.
that's small for, but it's also highlighting some of the, I think, things that set you apart is just the speed at which you learn, but I think also like time management.
Yeah.
And so,
I think there's time manager. I think there was a bunch of things that works for us. I think we did the right things. We did the right activities from a go-to-market perspective. But at the same time, we did genuinely have a product that had a strong product market fit with Japan. At the time, we were selling uh, an application that rewarded people for living healthier lifestyles, improved mental health. And in Japan, that was a big problem. And companies were starting to work out that that the not looking after people's stress and anxiety and overall well-being was impacting the business. So I think it was a combination of those two things.
and you highlighted earlier about sometimes having to be direct, but I guess in your case, how did you manage some partnership expectations or course correct when things didn't go as planned?
Yeah, again, I think we certainly didn't get it right all of the time. And there was certainly miscommunications and challenges there. But my method was to simply build strong relationships, not necessarily with like the people at the sponsor or the exec level, but more maybe on the manager level who are actually quite deep into the project. Build trust with them, communicate with them very directly, call it out, let them know what the problem is, and help let them help you solve it and communicate it directly to the exec sponsors. Sometimes it's better to do that through in English. Sometimes it's better to have a Japanese counterpart there. I would say mm, oftentimes it's better to have a Japanese counterpart to help kind
Mm.
of push that conversation through and have the really honest conversation. I found anyway. But maybe through you're there and you're trying to communicate it. But I had at the time I had an interpreter who really understood me and really helped to communicate. And then towards the end, I did hire a Japanese country manager, who was really able to, like, when things were going wrong, communicate our feelings much better than I could, right? And I think they were more open with her as well, on the other side.
Awesome. And so I guess next I'll talk a little bit kind of like, the scaling the success in the Japan market. But what were some of the maybe the KPIs or qualitative signals that you tracked?
Yeah, so okay, of course, everyone will point to sales. It's like, is the partner driving sales? Is the partner driving revenue? Are they hitting targets? Which I think is obviously absolutely critical. Don't get me wrong. But for me, I think obviously things take time, especially as we talked about earlier in the call, a value-based sale. And measuring people not just by sales early on, but also the leading indicators that will eventually drive results are really important. So sales are the output, but there are many inputs required to get to the output. So to determine whether a partnership is truly healthy. And those things for me are they being proactive? Are they introducing you to clients? Are they, engaging with you? Are they still passionate? All of these things are really, really important. And an example is, I think, managing expectations between the kind of headquarters is really important here as well. Because, for one of the partners we had, it was quite early on. The SLT was kind of always asking, what's happening? Are they driving sales? They're questioning the value quite early on. But I had to remain quite firm and say, listen, I can see that they're doing the right things. They're emailing their clients. They're bringing decision makers into the mix, right? And eventually those activities will pay off. So I think being patient is important. If those activities weren't there, then maybe I would question. But I think make sure that you're looking at the full picture.
So yeah, next, how do you decide when to double down or exit a partnership?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I like to draw comparisons to marriage. I think ultimately it comes down to shared goals, mutual commitment, and consistent effort. If both sides are investing the time, they're showing up, they're working towards the same outcome. I think that's when you keep going, you double down, and you overinvest. But if that effort starts to fade and the goals no longer align, it's usually time to kind of take a step back, right? Um, like in any relationship, if it's only one side that is committed, then you need to reconsider if this is the right sort of partnership.
Before we jump into your final advice for SaaS founders entering Japan, could you tell us what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in Japan, especially towards the end, I had weekends free because I wasn't with my family, and I really started to explore the world of AI, and I was genuinely so impressed by what you can do. And so what we're focused on now is we are building AI digital assistants that can automate 80% of the go-to-market process. And I'm using all of the learnings that I experienced through kind of getting to 50 B2B customers in Japan to almost improve these digital workers so that it makes life easier for CROs and really helps to unlock more revenue with less effort.
Awesome. And have you guys released yet? Or when is the expected release date?
Yeah. So we've launched, and we've built kind of the first digital worker, which is a content AI content assistant.
Hmm.
And we've got one customer using it already, and we're kind of like halfway through another product as well. So we're releasing them in quite an agile way.
And we'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah,
And
sure.
do you want to talk a little bit more about the first one that you released, the content agent?
Yeah. So the content agent is we all know content is so important to kind of build that top of funnel growth. Both content through the business, what they put out on social media, but also founder-led marketing as well. So what the SLT or the founders of the business are putting out on LinkedIn and generating exposure.
What is
So
an
what we're doing,
Sorry, what is an
sorry.
SLT?
Sorry, senior leadership team. So I genuinely believe that the senior leadership team of any business should be out there building their personal brands, whether that be on LinkedIn, whether that be on YouTube, etc. So what this content assistant does is it effectively looks at the internet, looks for trending ideas in an industry, and it creates whether it be blog articles, AI imagery um, that is incredibly accurate nowadays and looks really really good. And then also helps to build LinkedIn posts that go viral, and really helps to elevate people's brands. Um, so the idea is it automates 80 to 90% of what a typical content assistant would deliver. So instead of going out there and you don't have to hire a content assistant. You can, or you can have this to elevate that content assistant, while it builds out a lot of the more kind of manual and repetitive tasks that that person would need to do.
Yeah, I'll need to check it out myself too, because let's say creating content is definitely a pain point of mine.
Yeah, yeah. So happy to do a demo with you and see if you can elevate your brand.
Sweet, especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn
Mhm.
has so much potential.
Yeah, I think so too. I agree. Totally agree.
And so I guess, yeah, like kind of final advice. So I guess, yeah, would you have, I guess, what would be maybe some final advice for maybe founders who are trying to develop more partnerships in Japan, as someone who has definitely succeeded in doing that?
I would say for founders entering Japan, I think, truly think about how you're willing to commit and whether you're willing to commit. I always say this, but Japan is a market of commitment and credibility. And if people sense that you, and especially partners, sense that you're not 100% committed, then they're not going to do business with you. Simple as that. And when I say commitment, I don't mean hiring one salesperson and think it's going to happen. I mean localizing your product, building, the right team depending on what you need, and showing the market that you're here to stay. That is important for partnerships. And then what I would also say, and I think this is a really key point, is when you land in Japan, you might think, okay, let's go straight, let's develop a partnership. And some businesses can do that because let's say they have incredible traction everywhere in the world, and Japan is like their next market. But for some businesses, they can't do that, right? They may not have traction in multiple markets. So in those situations, what I would recommend and what I did was get your first customers directly before you go to the partner. Because if you can start showing traction in that market and showing that you have product market fit and customers like it and you're solving pain points and you take that data to the partners, it's like, oh my God, like, why wouldn't we work with you? So don't underestimate that. It gives you a lot of leverage in the conversations.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice on how you paved the way for them, and they could just follow on your initial success. So, listeners, I definitely recommend checking out NXL, which you can find at yournextlevel.io. Definitely use Shay's agent for your content marketing, and maybe reach out to us for your landing page creation localization for the Japan market and rock out. But yeah, no, it's very impressive what you, under your leadership and the team, could accomplish. And it's very amazing what you and Lewis accomplished, and also with the support of the team. And yeah, and would love to have you again in the future. Thanks so much, Shay.
Huge thank you, Tyson, for having me.